Hi, this is Ruth with another Crafterly video. This week is a watercolor card, and I'm using two different techniques to color my image. I'll be using distress inks and my water pen. So I saw this woodblock flower stamp in the clearance bin in Michael's, and I totally fell in love with it. So here I am inking this up with archival ink. It's a waterproof ink since I'll be coloring this picture with watercolor and I don't want it to smear. I'm pressing harder than usual onto the paper because this is cold pressed watercolor paper and not completely smooth. So I want to make sure to get a nice stamp impression on the paper. So I'm creating a palette on my acrylic block with my distress inks by just lightly smooshing the ink pads onto the block. Also, I don't show this on camera, but I also added a couple drops of water on the block too, so I can have the option of mixing up different gradients of color for a more watered down shade. I'm using a water pen, which has a built-in reservoir at the base of the pen where you can fill it up with water and it flows through the tip continuously. And you can squeeze the pen for more water to flow through. First method I use is called wet on wet. So that means with the areas I'm going to color, I wet it first before applying color and shading. With this method, I usually start off with a very light shade. I do a color wash with it before going to a darker shade, and then eventually blending it together with either a medium shade or just more water. When you add your darker shade, it'll move and blend naturally because of the initial water already on the paper. So I'm picking up my watered down color from my acrylic block and applying it lightly to all the leaves and the stems. And once I'm done with the lightest color, I dip my brush into my water jar just to clean it a bit, and I wipe it on my paper towel just to make sure my brush tip is not too wet, and I pick up a darker shade and I apply it to the centers of the leaves. And because the surface is already wet, the darker color will already start to wick towards the rest of the leaf and create a more graduated shading. The second method I use is called wet on dry, which is applying color directly on dry paper instead of that light color wash beforehand. I start with my darkest color and I apply color where I want my shading to be. With this flower, I'm having a little trouble getting the color dark enough because I think it's because I have too much water in my water pen and the tip is a little too wet. And as you know with watercolor, your colors always dry lighter than how it looks when it's wet. So occasionally I'm going back again to darken those shades even more. And then after I'm done, I press my pen a little bit to get more water flowing to the tip, and I run it through the entire flower to blend some of that darker color into the white areas to create a lighter color effect and a little blended look. And after I'm done coloring, I trimmed my image down, and to add a little interest and texture, I am distressing the sides of the paper so it creates a rough edge all the way around. You can use your scissors or even your fingernail for this, but because the watercolor paper is a little heavier weight of a paper, I needed more than my fingernails to do the job. So here I am using a Making Memories edge scraper and scraping the edges all around. I also cut down a piece of pattern paper for a border around my image, so I'm tacking that down with my tape runner. And then I realized that texture-wise, the pattern paper ought to coordinate with the watercolor paper too. So I decided to distress those edges too, so that they could match. And I'm putting it onto the card base with my tape runner and lining it up to make sure that everything is straight. And that's it. Here is the final card, simple and feminine and light. And here is a close-up of the flowers with the colors all dried to a softer look. All the supplies I used for this card are provided in the blog link below. And as always, thanks for watching.